A special edition of First and 12. The expanded college football playoffs. What Big 12 teams have the best shot? Can both Utah and BYU make it? And who goes on to win it all? Our hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back in First and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you. Your weekly look at Big 12 football in the 16-team era of the conference, and along with a 16-team Big 12, it's also a new era for the college football playoff. And I think, Alex, this just injects so much energy into this Big 12 conference, knowing that you win this league, you're going to be playing for a chance to compete for a national title. And this 12-team playoff era, man, it creates some opportunities for programs that have never been in this spotlight.
I mean, my heavens, UTEP got an invite to the Mountain West this week. Gonzaga is a member of the Pac-12.
Yeah,
these are realities that we talk about this week. These are things that happened this week. My favorite is that the Pac-12, middle of the week this week, maybe it was Thursday or so, Wednesday or Thursday, said, we're not going to talk expansion at this time anymore. I'm like, because you guys are just like, you're like, that they look like somebody who's just been like absolutely run through a car wash. Like they're like, yeah, we don't really want to talk about expansion anymore. Well, you know why? Because you added your 8th team with Utah State, and then you added Gonzaga in basketball. And right now you don't have to do anything, right? They're going to reassess and see where the money is, but that's one aspect of it. The college football playoff itself is going to change tremendously, and for the future of it, fine. There's a lot that we can get into and what that's going to look like. The possibility of a super league that we've talked about for years, that seems to be closer and closer along the horizon. But it's also one of those things where you have multiple TV deals across multiple conferences, Mitch, that make this extremely complicated, right? I mean, like there's so many moving parts to this, but it is one of those deals that it will change a lot over the next few years. How is it going to affect all these teams locally? I'm not really sure. But I do know that some of the realignment stuff has provided for some awesome fodder this week when it comes to the college football playoff stuff. Now, there are two things that were mentioned this week. One was the possibility of a super league, obviously with the SEC and Big Ten meeting together this week in secrecy. Whatever it is, whatever version of like a supervillain meeting inside of a volcano is, that's probably what they had this week. Between the two conferences. But of course, they're the ones who are going to be pulling all those levers. But the talk about what the future of college football looks like and what a playoff looks like, at the very least, the 12-team playoff looks like it's going to expand at least to 14, and that's just in the most recent version of how this thing's going to look. I don't know how that affects the local teams here. I don't know what that looks like. If that is just 2 extra bids that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be fighting over, does that matter for teams out west? Does it create more opportunities, or is it just one of those where you feel like it's going to be less and less for these teams locally here to be able to be a part of that national discussion?
I think it potentially would create less if it does go to that 14-team model. I feel like this 12-team model is the perfect setup for college football because it gives access to everyone, and it feels as fair as, honestly, you can make a college football postseason to determine a national champion. Now, it's always going to be, questions because they word things, that playoff committee, in a way that they're doing it in a setup to where they can avoid lawsuits, but at the same time, they're creating opportunities for the big logos to match up and play for national titles. But, the Big 12 is part of that mix, and they're a power conference, and they still have real access to that playoff where maybe they can get multiple teams into it. Now, the 14-team playoff potentially, and I hate that we haven't even got to the 12-team playoff yet, and the Big Ten and SEC are already kicking the tires on ideas of a 14-team playoff. Personally, I would love it if, the Big Ten and SEC just break away, and then, Big 12 and all the ACC, Big East in basketball, and the other conferences say, you're not part of the men's and women's basketball tournament. Like, you can go put together your own basketball tournament. You're going to have no access to the NCAA March Madness. So, two can play that game, Big Ten and SEC. And honestly, I think if you want to talk about conferences that have more strength between all of them, it's probably the Big Ten because they've got a national footprint, just like the Big 12. The SEC, if you want to really want to go national, having a regional conference, and like I know they've expanded quite a bit to 16, but still it's very regional. I don't know if that would have as much pull on people out west to watch an Alabama-Georgia game like they did last week, where it was a massive TV rating. But still, I don't think people out west would care if they don't have a connection and a link to college football. I think this year we're seeing insane TV ratings because everything kind of impacts everyone. And we're all kind of enamored to see this new era and these new logos going up against each other. Long term, though, that would wear off, and your regionalized conference would not have as much pull nationally. That's just my opinion. I think the Big Ten's in a better position. And honestly, the Big 12, by going national, if we continue to move in this direction of, making college football a national sport, which it already is, but, Big 12's in a good position in that regard too. But I fear the idea of the Big Ten and SEC just getting 4 automatic bids regardless. Like, that's just not right, because you've got a bigger booster pool and some bigger TV ratings. That means you're going to get guaranteed bids. Are you kidding me? That's insane. I hate that concept.
Whether or not they're guaranteed bids or not, I've got some real sad news for you, because the reality is even this 12-team playoff, the very first one, could get absolutely ruined by these two conferences being too powerful. Because I get it, they have a little bit more, it's supposed to be a good mix across the board when it comes to the College Football Playoff Committee that meets at the Gaylord Hotel in Grapevine, Texas in December. It's
always
right?
the Gaylord.
Yeah.
It always is.
So when they're sitting around that conference table, and then they've had a few or whatever, and then they finally go, okay, first order of business, how many of these SEC schools and Big Ten schools can we get in here? I don't know if that's really how it goes, but let me just paint an awful picture that JJ and I did on our show this week, and that is because we were like, okay, what's the reality? Okay, probably the SEC getting 4 and the Big Ten getting 4 just as a baseline, because after that you have the ACC, the Big 12, the G5, and who else? And then a Notre Dame possibility, right? Those are the only things that are outside of those. So those are the 4 that are the only ones that you know for sure you can't get. Well, right now the Big Ten doesn't look super powerful in my mind, because I don't know. I actually don't know how good Ohio State is. Everybody's crowning them, but I don't know.
I agree.
I'm all sorts of like looking around going, is everybody else wondering like why everybody's just putting Ohio State in the national championship game, and yet we're not really talking about them on a weekly basis except for, it looks like they won. Oregon, I don't know why everyone's going, and then Oregon probably too, right? And maybe even and at the beginning of the year, everybody's drooling about USC, and then they lose, and then you're kind of like, well, maybe we'll see at the end of the season. Maybe you'll still be there. We'll give you every chance possible to get in. We built a scenario in our heads where, because the reality, Mitch, is this: which of these teams are you not going to let into the college football playoff from the SEC? Let me start. Texas, you just tell me, in or out?
In.
Alabama.
In.
Georgia.
They're on the fence right now.
Okay, right now, after they lose to one of the best teams, like one of the craziest games I've ever seen.
They're that team, though, that'll be 8-4, and they still might get in.
Well, not even 8-4. Here's what's really going to happen. They're going to beat the heck out of everybody. Now, the only really a great matchup is going to be Texas and Georgia, who, here's what's going to happen. Georgia's going to win that game down in Austin. Mark my freaking words. They're going to win that game down in Austin, and then Texas and they are both going to be 1 losses, and their 1 loss is going to be to pretty darn good teams. They're going to go into this thing. It actually benefits you in the SEC to not go to the SEC championship game, right?
Yeah.
It benefits you if you're not undefeated or something. If you go to the SEC championship game, you're probably even both going to get in there. And then there's going to be teams like, okay, how about Tennessee? In or out?
I'd say in right now.
Okay. Ole Miss has not been great so far. I mean, they have been great so far.
In.
No, but that's what I'm saying, okay? How about undefeated in the top 10, Mizzou?
No, they're out.
Okay, except for, like, they were kind of on the edge last year, right? There's a ton of teams on this that are on the door. What I'm saying is that I just named off 7 teams, Mitch.
Yeah.
I just named off 7 freaking teams from the SEC that 4 or 5 of them were going, yep, in, and then 2 or 3 of them were going, maybe on the fence. the reality is that's one of those conferences. And maybe the Big Ten sneaks in two bids, and then where's there room for anybody? And why on earth would any of those guys that are sitting at that conference table, and gals, sitting around that conference table, why would they be motivated at all to do anything else except for put all the biggest names that get all the big TV money already to the table? Because everybody wants to see a Tennessee, Georgia. They want to see a Ohio State, Texas. They want to see all those different things. No one's talking about give me Utah and Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like,
I want to see that, though.
We do.
Yeah.
Of course we do.
I want to see Kansas State versus Mizzou.
And it is freaking deserved. But you know what? When they have those conversations, they'll say it doesn't play into it, but it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And it's a bummer. But that's, you know as well as I do, that this is exactly the way that this works.
And you look at how the playoff, they always try to act like they're this, upstanding operation. They hire their new, director of the playoff. He's a Air Force lieutenant general. And it's like, what does that have to do with anything? Oh,
nothing.
This just means he's a moral compass. Like, no, at the end of the day, you're still going to go with the dollars and the money. And I do think we got to get to a point with the playoff where it is divided by television networks. And I know that ESPN's got a new deal, but you can't tell me that ESPN doesn't have influence and that they're going to want more SEC teams in the playoff. Like, I just look, that might be conspiracy theory mode, but it just feels like that television has so much power in college football. Over the last 40 years, no other entity has had a bigger impact on this sport than television networks, and ESPN is the biggest Goliath still when it comes to college football. And I hope that the Big 12, they've got to elevate the product on the field, because as much as fun as it is for us to talk about the wild, crazy outcomes in this league, they've got to have some teams consistently emerge as these teams that, no matter what, you got to put them near the top. They're going to be in the mix. Come November, they're going to be in the hunt. Like, no one fits that billing yet in this league. And, I hope that happens in short order, because I hate the thought of being in a 14-team, 16-team playoff where it's just automatic bids given to the SEC and Big Ten, and they're taking up 75% of the bids. And then we're looking at a group of 8, where it's the group of 6 leagues, and then the ACC and Big 12 trying to occupy a handful of bids.
Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll chat a little bit more about this, and I've actually got a fun little, the predictors, these widgets. Get on ESPN. You can see if your team could be a part of this or not. It's fun to look at. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. We got more to go here. It is 1st and 12, brought to you by Macy's. Happy shopping. It's a bye week. We've got tons to talk about when it comes to the college football playoff and what that future looks like for both of the teams here locally and the Big 12. So stay here, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.